This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, April the 23rd. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, David Williams. He's produced the program. You'll be speaking with David when you pick up the phone to give us a shout to get in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So let's check in at the Allen Cup up along in Ontario. Yesterday was the last day of round robin play into the knockout stages today. So the Clareville Fort Caribou took on the Stony Creek Tigers yesterday afternoon. Clareville handled them easily. 5-0 win. A.J. Whiffen stopped 38 shots for the shutout. So into the knockout round today. Clareville finishes first, so they move on to Friday's semifinals. Today, though, the St. John's Roof Tech Capitals, they have a crack at Stony Creek, 3:30 this afternoon Eastern Time, to see if they can move on and maybe even face Clareville in the semis on Friday. So good luck to both. All right. So provincial hockey tournaments, minor hockey tournaments are ongoing right now. So safe travels, good luck, have fun to all who are participating. Is there an update regarding the Labrador teams that are traveling? Because, you know, you heard the story that if one of the Labrador teams qualifies for a final, they might not be able to play because they got to be back on their flight back to Labrador by 1 p.m. on Sunday. So has there been some sort of solution found there? I haven't heard an update in a while, so if you know, let me know. Quick baseball note. On this date, 1954, Hammer and Hank Aaron hit his first of 755 home runs. And, of course, not number one overall at this moment. Barry Bonds overtook Hammer and Hank with his 762 home runs. But, of course, Bonds not in the Hall of Fame. For 10 years of eligibility, never met the 75% threshold of voters by the Baseball Writers of America. And those other guys who were the big home run hitters of the day, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, and yes, Bonds, neither of them are in the Hall of Fame, which is interesting. All right, been a lot of talk about the federal election, obviously consequential, to say the very least. But we now know how many people have been registered to vote for who will be the next premier. So the Liberal Party released that 13,844 people signed up by the deadline, which was March 31st, to vote for either John Abbott or John Hogan. Of course, we'll know who will be the next premier on the 3rd of May when they wrap up their convention, the leadership convention. All right, that's far fewer than there was in years past. So let's see if I get the numbers. In 2013, about 24,000 Liberals voted to saw Dwight Ball come out as the leader. There was 5 candidates back then. 2020, just over 21,000 that saw Andrew Fury defeat John Abbott. So I guess there's a pretty tight timeline between when the Premier announced his resignation and to get this convention off the ground. So I guess the timeline is an issue there for sure. So they both paid a $50,000 nomination fee, had a cap on spending at $200,000, and of course, for the first time ever, obliged by the rules to publicly disclose who gave how much money to either of the candidates. So we should absolutely dig in here. And on the world of, you know, donating to your favorite politician or party, it really is high time. I've been banging this drum for a long time. We really have to execute what they call democratic reform. And in this case, campaign finance. It is wild, wild west in this province, and it needn't be that way. For me, it's a political self-inflicted wound. I think the party that eventually does deal with campaign finance is going to look good. Now, I know it might not be in their best interest for raising money because it costs a lot of money to run a political campaign, but I think it'll curry favor with the electorate. I really do. People think, whether it's the optics or it's the reality, big donors get the gravy. The big donors get the contracts. That's what people think. So I think if one party or another wanted to dig in on that, they'd absolutely get some favor with the electorate. So let's talk whatever you want inside the world of provincial politics. Renewed calls once again, given the fact that the Liberal government said they would consider creating an office for the disability advocate. That was a couple of years ago. Still no activity on that front. Important to remember, some third of the population is in the disabled community. So it just makes sense that they have an advocate, similar to the seniors advocate, to take on their business, to be their advocate, their champion, talk about systemic issues. Now what they're talking about, with continued review and letters that have been sent to various ministers inside that portfolio, the minister responsible for the status of persons with disabilities, working toward. But this is where it gets complicated, and I think really unfortunate. They're talking about lumping in disability with the seniors advocate, and then calling it the seniors advocate and for people with complex needs. Not so sure that hits the target. It certainly doesn't hit the target if you ask Nancy Reid at the Coalition of Persons with Disabilities. So, important conversation there to be had. And speaking of the seniors advocate, good conversation with Susan Walsh yesterday about their most recent report called An Ounce of Prevention is a Pound of Cure. Look, we do know, and it's right there in front of us, what the future is going to look like insofar as the age demographics of the province. The long-term care facilities are already pretty full. And in the next 5 years, the next wave of people who may indeed need a long-term care facility is going to be extremely difficult to accommodate. Then comes the concept of what the government can do to ensure that people have safe, dignified, healthy surroundings in their own home. Some really, I think, insightful recommendations in this most recent report. Things like, if we're talking about prescribed drugs, prescribed treatment, things like shower rails and those types of things to be covered, kind of makes sense because there's a lot of seniors where things like adding or modifying your home can be cost prohibitive. Then even if you wanted to pay for it on your own dime through the form of an interest-free loan from the government, also makes a lot of sense. In that vein, one of the key recommendations, I think, is for seniors who maybe don't know what next steps could be, what they may indeed need to prevent, for instance, a fall in their own home, just some sort of fundamental awareness campaign. You know, what you may need, what you might want to consider, who you can go to, where you can buy these things, what kind of contractors you'd be looking for. So we do know a lot of young people and a lot of seniors listen to this program. And if you'd like to chime in on what you heard from Susan Walsh yesterday or just any of the content of that report, I think we should absolutely take it on. All right, quick one. Had what I'll call a passionate caller yesterday regarding the amount of drugs on the street, what it's meaning for public safety and societal harm, and the death spiral of addiction, all of those included. And some of it went to, inspections at the ports. And it may be inspections for anything arriving on the island. So at the airport, they can utilize drug-sniffing dogs. But one of the conversations went to Marine Atlantic. This is from a former Crown Prosecutor, Mike Murray. All right, drug-sniffing dogs at terminals and airports is the subject line. These are allowed at international border crossings because there's a reduced expectation of privacy, higher security concerns, and they're explicitly authorized by law. It would not be allowed interprovincially due to the charter for domestic travel without a warrant targeting a specific traveller. So he goes on to say he's seen a lot of drug seizures thrown out in court over the years. So this would require a change in legislation as opposed to simply policy of training and bringing people in to use these drug-sniffing dogs, say, for instance, at the Marine Atlantic Terminal. So that's just a bit of the law that I wasn't aware of, and I'm glad Mike sent me that note. On that front, plenty of people have picked up on what's been laid down in the province of Alberta regarding legislation that's been tabled to force involuntary treatment for those suffering from an addiction, whether they're at risk of harming themselves or others. Everybody, I think, can agree that people need help. And how that help, what it looks like, differs from province to province. So whether it be about the number of detox beds, the number of beds in a rehab facility, the time between out of detox into rehab. And I've got a ton of people sending me notes saying, we should demand that our government do what they're doing in Alberta. Okay. If a family member or loved one comes forward and says they think that their loved one should be forced into what they call compassionate care bed, involuntary treatment, that they get a hearing within 72 hours, and this independent body of 10 will decide whether or not that person is forced into this treatment program. People talk about it being more like crime and punishment versus healthcare. We just need something that works. Inside that world, and you can look around for yourself, there is very limited research into this. There has never once been a study done that compared outcomes from forced treatment to what would happen if there was no treatment available at all. One place that has been studied fairly extensively was a program that was introduced in Massachusetts in the United States. Remarkably, and I'm not exactly sure why, but that involuntary treatment led to more overdoses, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So I get the concept of let's try to get people the help they need to kick the habit. But unless you want the help might not work. So I respect the fact that people are thinking about these issues and understanding exactly what the number of drugs on the streets, the prevalence of addiction, what that means for everything included, interaction with the healthcare system, the criminal justice system, the sense of public safety. But involuntary treatment, it'd be nice to know whether or not it can be proved to work, because that's all I'd want. I would imagine that's what most of you want, is something that actually works, because you see the stories as much as I do. Anyway, let's keep going. With the federal election, the people's business has not been attended to for the most of this calendar year. Parliament was at a standstill. And then, of course, for political reasons, and only political reasons, Parliament was prorogued. Is anybody at all manning the ship at the Coast Guard? Is the federal government going to do anything about cleaning up the potential devastating spill that might happen in Lark Harbour with the MSC Baltic 3 that ran aground? 1 million plus litres of fuel on board? I know the company has proven to be very stingy and looking for the lowest cost option, trying to hire a salvage company. But first things first, there has to be a road built for access. So doesn't seem like there's a lot of movement on that front. And we can only hope that the worst case scenario does not present itself, because that would be devastating for the area. But I haven't heard much from federal government representatives about what they can or should be doing here. But they should get off their duff and do it. All right. Speaking of the environment, so yesterday was Earth Day, and we talk about endangered species and biodiversity and all those types of important matters. And then a call at the end of the show yesterday talking about not endangered species, but invasive species, which I found to be really interesting. Technically, the American toad is not invasive because it was introduced, unlike, say, the green crab. And the rules surrounding green crab are really quite bizarre. Since that call, and I'm always surprised with what takes off via email, can't tell you how many people are describing what they see and hear with the numbers of American toads where they live. Most of the emails came from Central. People reporting, especially on a damp morning, on the roadways and the highways, littered as far as you can see with American toad. I didn't know it was that big an issue out there. And I've spent some time in Central. I have a son who lives out in Central. But I had no idea. Nobody has sent me a photograph as of yet, so if you have one that can give me a visual, but just how many American toad are on the street and what can be done about it, or if anything needs to be done. I don't know how problematic the toad might be, but people talk about thousands upon thousands of them on their commute, especially on a wet morning, on the asphalt. So apparently it's a bigger deal than I was aware of, but anyway, there you go. All right. So obviously, millions of Canadians weren't really that concerned with public policy and cost of platforms. How do I know? Because 7.3 million Canadians have already voted, which is a remarkably high number. I'm not surprised at the turnout, and I would imagine the 28th of April is also going to see lineups and a ton of Canadians wanting to cast their ballot this go around. And yes, it is a consequential election. And inside the cost of platforms, boy, it's pretty thin gruel for the most part. But one thing that I'm also seeing, whether it be on social media and or in my email inbox, is about taxes, specifically regarding your home. The two, the two parties most likely to win here, either the Liberals or the Conservatives, their plans on housing are relatively similar. But what is not included in anybody's is capital gains on your primary residence. This is important. So the government, the Liberals, did float an increase of the inclusion rate on capital gains over $250,000 from 50% to 66%. It didn't happen. A lot of pushback. But now it's capital gains on your primary residence has always been exempt. And I'm being told that it's in the Liberal platform, but it's not. So keep your hands off my primary residence as it pertains to capital gains. It's an excruciatingly stupid policy. So that would put the life of seniors in particular, and I guess the life of anybody who is either upsizing or downsizing or simply wants to buy a newer home, whatever the case may be, when you sell, your home is exempt. Your primary residence is exempt from capital gains. I went to the platform. I looked as closely as I could. It's not in there. I do know where this comes from, though. In 2018, the Ontario caucus of the Liberal Party did indeed recommend at a town hall this exact policy. Capital gains inclusion rate on your primary residence, but it's not there. We're told by the Conservatives that it will be there, which is their forecast of what might happen. The party itself says, no, that's not happening. And if any party plans on doing that, it's a devastatingly stupid idea. for the government, and it would be punitive for individuals when they go to sell their own home. So I got a lot of people telling me that it's there, but if you look, it's not. And I went to the party, said, look, is this something that's going on? Then I was reminded about the 2018 Ontario caucus and their pledge, or their recommendation, pardon me, to include capital gains on your primary residence. It has not been part of the platform. The party says it's not coming, and good. If any party of any stripe ever thinks that's a good idea, they'll find out the hard way. All right, a couple of quick ones. So, again, not a whole lot of distance between the Liberals and the Conservatives regarding defence spending. You know, it really does boil down to the unreliable partner that we now share the border with and what it means to protect the country. There'll be back and forths about buying early detection aircraft and talking about, you know, the radar system that we're partnering with Australia and Arctic bases. Look, the Arctic is going to be important into the future. A super aggressive Russia, and you know the rest. We have, for decades, ignored the military in this country, and now it's coming home to roost. They're both talking about upping defense spending to 2% of GDP, which is a pledge as old as 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea. We've never lived up to it. Consequently, we are unprepared, we are understaffed, so they can talk about fixing the recruiting and the number of Arctic bases, but it boils down to political will and just how important and exactly what it looks like for Canada to be more self-reliant, to protect our sovereignty, and to actually defend ourselves if that comes to pass sometime into the future. So we can argue about the number of Arctic bases and whatnot, but there's some pretty fundamentals kind of missed here. Added to that, now there's no distinct plan or financial roadmap to 2% of GDP, and that's probably going to change. Most people think that at the upcoming NATO meeting in June, that the alliance is going to move that pledge from 2% to 3%. The American president has already floated the requirement of 5% of GDP to be spent on defense spending. So they can talk about commitments to 2%, but it looks quite likely this summer that new pledge to be a member of NATO, you don't get kicked out. There are several nations that don't hit the target of 2%, but the consensus is that probably at the end of that meeting, it'll be 3%, which is not insignificant monies. You want to take it on, we can do it. All right, this is a great story. And I heard Russell Bowers and Jerry Lynn Mackey speaking with Jocelyn Kelland. That's Otto Kelland's daughter. And this is the fact that Let Me Fish Off Cape St. Mary's, one of the most iconic and beautiful songs representing this province, is going to be inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame during the ECMAs coming up in May here in the city of St. John's. Written in 1947 by songwriter, author, police officer Otto Kelland. The story behind it is also beautiful. You know, a fisherman originally from this province was trying to get on a ship to come back to Newfoundland. He was fishing off of Boston, but longed and preferred to be fishing in his dory off Cape St. Mary's. There's a bunch of different renditions out there. I know I heard Con O'Brien on the show with the morning show crew this morning. The Irish Descendants do a lovely version of it. And Con says he's sung that song live maybe 4,000 or 5,000 times. I'm not surprised with that at all. He also made reference of Dennis Ryan's Fancy, the version that they've done, which is absolutely gorgeous. But a song representing the province, so indicative of the longing that people, whether you're a fish harvester or otherwise, the longing that people have to come home. And it's going into the Canadian Songwriter Hall of Fame. I think that's brilliant. All right, social media, we're on Twitter. Before we get to that, it was 20 years ago today that the very first video was uploaded to YouTube. It's a pretty weird little video. It's basically a guy at the zoo looking at an elephant, and the title is Me at the Zoo. So it was posted by a guy named Jawed Kareem. He's a programmer. He partnered with two of his former PayPal co-workers, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen. They built the company, YouTube. They sold it 19 months later to Google for $1.65 billion. So in just over a year and a half, they turned one video, me looking at an elephant, to $1.65 billion. Currently, there's 2.6 billion monthly active users of YouTube, which is mind-boggling. All right, Twitter, as we mentioned, we're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. That means you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one and say good morning to Katie Power. She's the Industry Relations Representative at the FFAW. Good morning, Katie. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you on the program. Lots to dig into as usual, but let's start with the West White Rose Compensation Program. What is it and what do fish harvesters need to know?
Right, thank you. So I am just hoping to use your platform and your reach to get out to our membership before the open call process clues up this Friday. So starting in May, as I think folks are well aware, the Cenovus Energy is going to be towing the concrete gravity structure, the CGS, out from the Argentia graving dock up to the head of Placentia Bay. The tow is expected to take about 24 hours, and the CGS is going to remain at its anchorage site at the head of Placentia Bay for approximately 4 to 6 weeks ahead of its transit to the White Rose Field. Once completed, there's an additional tow out, of course, from the head of Placentia Bay out to the field, and that's going to take place in mid-June. So because of all this, there is going to be sort of similar to last time. We've done, this is a phase 2 of compensation, I guess. So harvesters who believe they're going to be affected by the structure's tow route or the mooring at the inshore location due to, it being kind of in the peak of our fishing season for crab, lobster, and other species, they may be entitled to compensation. Now, in saying that, potentially affected parties must self-identify, as if to say they have to call me or someone at the union to add their name to the list to be considered for inclusion in the compensation plan. So that's what I'm hoping to get out here on the lines today, to just let folks know you must self-identify in order to be included in the compensation plan.
What do they need to say to prove their case that they should be included in compensation? Or is it simply a matter of just adding your name? Because there's a different value of the different species that you mentioned, and the interruption might be different for different harvesters. So what should they be saying to bolster their case?
For the harvesters, it's just a simple call of self-identifying and adding your name to a list. We have a robust committee put forward of fish harvesters, FFAW staff, and Cenovus representatives it's called the Fisheries Liaison Committee, and there's some negotiating, I guess, and discussions. They're the folks that are determining the eligibility of those who put their name forward.
Is there any sort of model that you can lean on for what compensation could or should look like here?
Unfortunately, no. This is sort of the second time we've done this compensation framework, but I will say the first time around for the dredging that occurred in the fall, it did sort of feel like we were reinventing the wheel a little bit. There was definitely some lessons learned from that, but sort of with respect to the tow out that happened, say, for Hebron in 2018-ish, I believe, that compensation program was very different, and a lot of that is bound by, confidentiality. So we don't really have access to that information. So we are kind of, it's very specific, and we are just doing our best to make sure that our harvesters are fairly compensated.
Who gets to make this decision? Is it a matter of negotiation and ultimately it's up to Cenovus to say yes, no to whatever amount, or is there an independent arbitrator? How does that look?
So the way that it worked the last time around for the dredging, and the way that we anticipate it will work this time around as well, is that the committee, which is FFAW harvesters, FFAW representatives, and Cenovus, as I said, we're sort of working together in collaboration with each other to sort of meet a mutual agreement.
Fair enough. And so when the deadline comes, end of business day on Friday, is there a timeline when the decisions will be made?
We are hoping, FFAW and our membership, that there will be a decision made, at least an agreement in principle, before the tow out takes place at the beginning of May.
How many people do you anticipate will actually be affected by this?
Well, realistically, any fish harvester in Placentia Bay will be in some way, shape, or form affected by this. There is going to be, an encroachment effect. That bay is congested, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, as it is. There's so much going on in there. So any increase in activity or taking up space is going to impact harvesters.
I don't know if this is something you have any additional information on, but what's the union have to say? I've heard you speak out about the Baltic 3 that ran aground in Lark Harbour and the inaction on trying to do something about it. It seems to me the federal government is awful quiet. That would be the responsibility of the Coast Guard. Of course, the company itself, with one of the richest men in the world at the helm, they should be doing more as well. But it sounds like it's pretty quiet out there to me. What do you know?
Absolutely agree with you. It was pretty much radio silence on our end as well. We've reached out to the Canadian Coast Guard. We've reached out to folks at the MSC Baltic. And I will say that we did actually hear back from both entities the end of the working day yesterday. We had a representative from the MSC. They are actually on the ground in Lark Harbor today, looking to set up a meeting with Dwan, our president, and potentially harvesters in the area later this week. And we did hear from the Coast Guard as well. I'm just pulling up my email here. That, of course, they're giving us the reassurances that everything in their power is being done. That sort of, verbiage. But again, we haven't actually met with them. We don't really know what's being done, but we are hoping to get some more information on that now in the coming days.
Yeah, because it's been a couple of months. I haven't seen any pictures of these so-called tar balls, but the risk is obviously very real. One false move, one bad storm, we could be talking about environmental disaster, which we can't
Absolutely.
afford. One more before I let you go. When the federal court denied the Northern Kyle injunction put forward by the FFAW, it was supposed to go to what they call a judicial review. When is that?
I, unfortunately, am not the person to speak to on any of that. I'm just the industry relations representative, so I can certainly get you in touch with the right folks in our organization if you need some answers for that.
Sure, and I said that was the last one, but this is the last one. You and I have spoken in the past about amendments to the Atlantic Accord and what it might mean for offshore wind. Again, we were told by the government that there were indeed proponents kicking those tires, but haven't heard much since. Has there been any advancement in discussions about some of the risks associated with the fishery, whether it be communications or otherwise?
From our side, no. The only sort of advancements that I'm aware of with respect to offshore wind is that the provincial legislation, that process began in mirroring that to the federal. But beyond that, no movement from a fishing industry perspective either.
Yeah, and just for people's information, it's one thing for the physical restrictions that would be presented by offshore wind turbines, but it also can compromise things like radar and communication. So that's pretty important stuff when we talk about safety on the water, as opposed to simply how close you can fish to a wind turbine. Any final thoughts, Katie, before we say goodbye?
No, I think that is everything from my side. But again, just want to get it out there for any of my membership that is listening. Please self-identify if you think you may be impacted by the Synovus tow-out operations by end of day this Friday.
Appreciate your time, Katie. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Pleasure. Bye-bye. Katie Power, Industry Relations Representative with the FFAW. Let's get to the break. When we come back, we're going to Labrador. Say good morning to the Deputy Mayor of Lab City. That's Mitchell Marsh. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Deputy Mayor of Labrador City. That's Mitchell Marsh. Deputy Mayor Marsh, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How you doing?
Very well. How about you?
Well, I'm doing good, sir. Just calling to give you an update, I guess, on the flights that we talked about there a couple of weeks ago for the Labrador athletes traveling out for hockey provincials.
Yep.
Very pleased to say that our flights did get accommodated for us. We fought very hard, I guess we'll say, and we had Provincial Airlines really stepped up to the plate, and I got to give those guys a shout out. Their team certainly accommodated us and got us a flight back on Monday, and it wasn't an easy task for them to do. And also, there were some elected representatives that were really involved. Lloyd Parrott and his team, as well as up to and including the Premier and their team, got involved to try to make this happen for us, and it was very successful. And we're leaving today and coming back Monday, and none of our kids are going to be out a championship game should we make it. So we're really pleased to say that.
Well, I'm really pleased that I mentioned it, so I got an update here this morning. That's great news, because it was really disappointing. If anyone's ever played any minor sports, period, and certainly for minor hockey, the tournament of the year is the provincials. You look forward to it the entire time, and even just getting in and out of Labrador, I think the number I remember was $1,422 for a ticket, and then not even be ensured that if you're lucky enough to make the finals, that you can play in it. It was just unacceptable, and I'm really pleased that whoever made the final decision, I guess at PAL, and whoever put some of the horsepower in to get this done, bravo.
Absolutely, Paddy. I mean, for us here in Labrador, we're a different entity altogether. I mean, we get 2 tournaments a year. We get to travel and play against Goose Bay. We love going to Goose Bay, and we love when Goose Bay comes to Lab City. But we don't have the opportunity to travel invitational tournaments every second weekend, and we can't jump in a car and drive 2 hours down the road and play a different team, every so often. So the provincials, like you said, it's a really big deal for us. It's our one big hoorah of the year where we get to go and our kids get to showcase their talents on a provincial level, and it's big for our kids, and it's also big for the parents too. We fundraise all year round to be able to do this, And like you said, we were very disappointed in hockey now in the schedule and also in the flight schedule that we had. And it wasn't going to give us a fair kick at the can. But now Provincial Airlines and our elected representatives really came through for us. And myself and another hockey dad, we'll say Bruce Fahey, we really fought hard and we pulled what we could and made sure that we got the flights that accommodated us. And I got to say, we're really, really pleased. We're leaving today and we're back Monday and hopefully coming back with a banner.
Yeah, absolutely. Good news. So, I'll see if I can craft this the way I intend. We do know the cost, which is prohibitive for many people, especially if you have to travel frequently in and out of Labrador. But as a young hockey player, where they've been involved in the fundraising, they understand the concerns, but there's something also cool about getting on a plane to go play hockey when you're a little kid. So that's, just a big part of the experience. On that front regarding travel, it was big in the news there for quite a long time. We had a recent report about how much the flights have cost, the increase, whether it be out of Wabush or Goose Bay compared to the rest of the country. And then like Eva's Air and the late Pat White, they were talking about putting forward a plan for additional competition to hopefully stabilize, if not bring down the prices. Any move on that front?
Nothing to my knowledge, Patty, and I've obviously been involved in several meetings with that in terms of being on the town council and stuff. And there's a lot of variables that are in place for that, and it's not necessarily just one particular airline that is, making this tough on us. There's so many variables. You've got airport fees. You've got employment issues. Right now there's nowhere to store a plane in Lab City. So when Provincial Airlines come and they land, they can't stay overnight because they have no hangar to put their plane in. So there's a few different variables here. We need the provincial government to help us out in terms of getting a hangar in place. We need, our different grounds crews. We need from what I hear, Provincial Airlines pays just as much to land in Wabash as they do Montreal Trudeau. You know what I mean? So there's different costs and different variables around the whole situation. No doubt there's something that could be done on an airline front. There could be more competition come, where we need other airlines to step up and help us there. But there's so many variables that make up this whole package. It's tough for one airline to just do it all. I understand. I try to see both sides of it, Patty. I don't want to just be, I don't want to scream a ball and say these people need to give us a better rate, because no doubt the rate is very expensive, but there's a lot of variables that go into it. So traveling out of Lab City at the end of the day is crazy expensive. We need more competition. We also need the feds, and we need the province to step up and give us more assistance to be able to make it more affordable for these airlines to land in Wabush. At the end of the day, you're coming to the middle of nowhere. I don't know if you've ever been to Lab City or Wabush, but
yeah.
when you fly in, you realize where you're going, right? You are in the middle of nowhere. And we just need we need the province and also the feds to step up and really help us out. Probably more so the feds than the province, honestly, because it is a federal, Transport Canada is federal, so. Yeah,
the airline industry is federally regulated. That's right. So it was years ago when we saw the national carriers, notably Air Canada in this case, and WestJet, of course, with most of the western part of the country, when they started to reduce their routes to rural, remote parts of the country, including Labrador, the writing was on the wall. It was going to be more difficult and more costly very quickly, and that is exactly what happened. Last one before I let you go, Deputy Mayor. Sticking with the air. The location of the water bombers. So we speak with Jordan Brown on this particular issue, and there's always going to be different parts of the province saying the water bombers need to be here. But even just the expansive geography of Labrador and what we've seen in years past, just remember Churchill Falls was evacuated last year as well. So any update on where they're going to locate the water bomber, if there's going to be one in your area?
Well, Patty, the last I heard is that there isn't one going to be coming here, which is it's a soft spot for me. I'm give you a little side note here now. I'm also a volunteer firefighter and have been for almost 13 years, and I stayed here while my family left last summer when Lab City got evacuated. And a water bomber is critical for our area. It really is. And, I support Jordan in his fight to get a water bomber here. I do listen to the House from time to time, and I can't remember exactly, so I don't want to get into the fine details, but there was a member the other day that kind of said we didn't need it. I would challenge that member to get his facts straight, because we do need it. We're surrounded by woods. We had Lab City. They got evacuated last year. 9,000 people. We evacuated in almost 5 hours. Churchill Falls got evacuated. Prior to that, Goose Bay also had their own state of emergency with a fire, which could have easily surrounded their community. we need a water bomber here. Even if we had one water bomber, Patty, I've been fighting fires for 13 years. I was involved in the evacuation of Wabush back in 2013. I was also involved in the evacuation more so this past summer. A water bomber could do early intervention in a fire. Yes, we could have a water bomber sitting on a tarmac in Grand Falls or in Gander or wherever it's due. That's not good enough, Patty. We need a water bomber here to be able to do early intervention on a fire. Yes, if a forest fire is out of control, we're not going up there with hoses and pumps. As you know, the regular Joe may think that's what happens. That's not what happens. We need water bombers. We need bird dog planes to be able to go up there, fight the fire, get things in place so that we can start the initial attack, so we can start our attack. What we need is a water bomber on site to be able to start that early intervention. Do I think a water bomber would have prevented us from evacuating the summer in Lab City? No. The fire was too big. It was too out of control. But that fire was also raging for about a week before it got to the point it got to. So we could have had early intervention should we had a water bomber here. So it's a soft spot for me, if you could tell. But we 100% need a water bomber here on site. Not 24/7, but at least from, say, the end of May until the middle to the end of September.
Yeah, and I'm not speaking for you or any other municipal leaders in Labrador, but in addition to that, again, I'm reading between the lines maybe here, but, things like prescribed burns and creating fire breaks before fire season, before it's too late, before the fires are right up upon these small communities, that hasn't been attended to. We do a poor job in the province anyway about clearing the fire load and the windfall, because that's the fuel. That really gives these forest fires the fuel they need to become out of control. So I think we just have to have a better strategy on that front. I'm not entirely sure what the strategy looks like, but if I read between the lines, I think there was some inference of that last summer.
It would definitely help, Patty. What fire breaks work, it's proven. It's an old method that was used for years, and fire breaks do help. For years, there were fire breaks around different communities. Again, I'm with you. I don't know if they were continuously maintained. Who owns the fire break? Is it the municipality? Is it the province? I know when we had our fire when we had our fire this summer, we had to build our fire break. And, Patty, it's a sin because it's right through the middle of town, really, because it was so close. So if it was maintained on the outskirts of town, we wouldn't have this big, 4-dozer wide path gone down through a beautiful forested area in our community. So I don't know who owns it. Is it the municipality? Is it the province? Is it the feds? Who knows? I'm not sure, but I'm with you. There needs to be better conversation on the fire break issue as well to prevent fire spread, because until you go through it, you realize how much you actually need the resources around when the you-know-what hits the fan.
No question. I appreciate your time this morning and the positive update regarding the flights for the minor hockey players. Safe travels. Good luck.
Thank you, Patty. Take care, bud.
You too, man. Bye-bye. That's Mitchell Marsh, the Deputy Mayor of Lab City. Let's take a break. Neil's in the queue to talk about abandoned properties, and then you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the programme. Let's go to line number 1. Neil, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty, and thanks for taking my call.
Happy to do it.
Patty, calling from Cowan Heights. There's a definition that's often said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So I guess I'm a little bit insane again this year because I'm starting my annual routine of lobbying with the City of St. John's to try to get them to take some action on an abandoned property here in Cowan Heights. Live on a nice street. Everyone takes some pride of ownership. There's curb appeal, and we have this property that's been abandoned for about 10 years now. It's open to the environment. Starlings and squirrels are nesting in there. It's overgrown. There's a broken down, damaged patio that was towed out of the backyard. That's in the driveway. It's been there now for about 2 years. Myself and a number of our neighbors have been lobbying with the City of St. John's for a number of years now for some action, and we get all kinds of promises, but nothing happens. And I guess today I finally had enough, so I decided to come on Open Line, hoping that some of my neighbors and friends in Cowan Heights will hear this call and perhaps start calling the City of St. John's to put some pressure on them because they're either unwilling or unable to take any action themselves.
Who owns the property? You don't have to give me a name. So the person who abandoned it, they still hold title on it, or do you happen to know?
My understanding is the property owner still resides somewhere in this neighborhood. There's all kinds of rumors and speculation. I won't go down that road,
Sure.
But it is a private ownership of a property. It has been abandoned, and it's a real eyesore. It's got to be a health hazard because, say, there's squirrels, there's rats, there's cats, and everything living inside of it now. And we just had enough. But for some reason, last year I was promised by the City of St. John's, no names mentioned, about certain actions that would be taken, and nothing is happening. And we're all just tired.
Yeah, I mean, there is a mechanism available for municipalities to force the hand of property owners on a variety of fronts. So whether it be, like, for instance, an old rusted-out vehicle that's been in the driveway for years. I know of a particular circumstance, I'm going to say maybe 8-10 years ago, where someone I know forced the hand of the city and had an old rusty vehicle hauled off a piece of property. So they do have some authority here. Where it begins and ends, I'm not entirely sure, but it's shameful anyway. Like, even if it's an abandoned property or someone who's just unwilling to keep up their property like the rest of their neighbors. There's a lot of neighborhoods where you can pick out that one eyesore, as you call it.
Absolutely, and Patty, I'm sure there's legislation on the books. I'm sure there's bylaws, but this is just boggling my mind as to why the City of St. John's are unwilling or unable to take action. So it's not like this started yesterday. This has been ongoing for years, and I know that my neighbors, as well as myself, are quite frustrated. So again, my call today is a call to arms for my neighbors in Cowan Heights to start flooding the City of St. John's with phone calls in the hopes that we can get some action here.
I hope you get it, because I find that to be an extremely frustrating issue, period. There's one such property in and around where I live, and you can't help but be distracted by it. No matter how many times I've driven by it, I have to look at it every single time. Maybe it's just like, the whole conversation about you can't look away from a car wreck, because that's what it reminds me of. I look at it every single time with the same level of frustration.
And Patty, for no other reason, it's also a safety hazard because there's a retaining wall that's falling in on this property. There was some action taken by somebody last year, and they made a bad situation worse. There's now open pits in the back of that backyard. If small children decide to run through there playing hide and seek, there's going to be an accident, and it's not going to be good.
I appreciate the time, and if the city would like to respond and give us an idea about why the delay or why they're not doing something about it or what they're considering, they're more than welcome to give us an update here on the show. Neil, I appreciate you doing this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Patty. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And, it's not necessarily the exact same conversation, but he mentioned the rats and the cats and playing peekaboo in this abandoned property. We did indeed have conversation with Ward 4 Councillor Tom Davis on issues regarding demolition, and I don't know if it would be associated with something like this particular property and whether or not demolition is required. I don't know. I'm just not trying to say that. But we do know that abandoned properties will very quickly become the home for the rodent population. So you can only imagine how bad it is in there. So it brings me back to the conversation we had, for instance, like tearing down major buildings like whether it be the Hoyles-Escazoni complex or the McPherson School and the old nurses' residence at the Grace. The requirement of the city and to oblige the contractor to go in and deal with pest control before demolition happens and to keep someone on site to ensure that it is dealt with appropriately. Because we all know development leads to the dispersal of, in particular, rats. So there's a couple of areas in and around where I live where that is a distinct worry. And I'm not so sure that the municipality, in this case, the City of St. John's, I don't know what it's like out in Paradise or CBS around Pearl, but I do know that the rat issue in the city is a problem. It really, truly is. And so, say, for instance, if there's going to be a big housing development on the old Ballyhaley property, the golf course that has been sold, of course, and now Ballyhaley's up at what used to be Clovelly. You can only imagine how many burrows that have been created by rats are on that property. And if you just go anywhere, I guess just about anywhere in the country, Alberta says there's no rats in Alberta, but you know the deal. And they go to build anything, a subdivision or a big building, then of course the nearby surrounding neighborhood will all of a sudden see an obvious and distinct increase in the number of rats in particular. So it's a big issue. It makes my skin crawl. I do not like the look of them. I'm afraid of the rat. I hate to say that as a big, hairy you-know-what man, but I find it to be disgusting. And I don't think the city does a whole lot about it. They'll leave it up to the individual homeowner, individual resident to put out the traps and maybe put out the poison or whatever it is people do, or to pay their own bill to hire a pest control company. But at some point, that becomes fruitless as well. Let's just say in your neighborhood, you take it upon yourself to bring in a pest control company, whichever one, and they do the work on your property. But if not everyone in the neighborhood does it, then it's just short-lived success, short-lived relief from whatever it is that you see in and around your backyard or in your garage or your shed or whatever the case may be. So I don't know if it ever becomes all the way to, say, for instance, a health risk, even though it can be. We know that to be true. You know, exposure to rodent feces can indeed be a problem for your health. So is there a conversation to be had there? Because with the summer months out just upon us, and it's a nice warm day today, and we know over the winter, you can see the tracks in the snow, just about, I would suggest, every single property in this city. Now in the summer, like, for instance, and I hate to say it, but there's a burrow against my foundation in my front yard. Right? And I've paid the money to try to deal with it, and with some success, but obviously not enough. So I don't know if there's ever going to be a conversation we had at the municipal level or the provincial level, because I don't know exactly how they handle it in Alberta, but it is one of those claims that the province makes all the time, is that there aren't any rats in Alberta, which is not true. But they do a lot with the so-called rat patrol to police the borders as best possible to deal with it, because we know the trick here. Once the brown Norwegian rat takes hold where you live, and I know this is disgusting, but it's a part of the conversation here in the city, they can increase the population in jig time. So you put a couple of pairs in one neighborhood or another, and before you know it, they're overrunning the place. And I know that's an uncomfortable and a potentially disgusting conversation, but I think it's something people deal with on a day-to-day basis, certainly where I live. And again, I can't say what it looks like out in other communities surrounding the city, whether it be in Paradise, Mount Pearl, or CBS, or anywhere, because I don't really know. I can tell you what we see and the stories we hear in the city. It's unbelievable. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. Email address is openon@vocm.com. Today's a good day to get on the show. Let's see. Let's get the numbers out there. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break, and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number one and say good morning to Dr. Heather Keller, professor in the Schlegel Research Chair of Nutrition and Aging at the University of Waterloo. She'll be giving the annual Faith Elizabeth Winifred Rusted Bailey Nutrition Lecture tomorrow at the Bruno Centre here at Memorial University. And Dr. Keller joins us on line number one. Good morning, Doctor. You're on the air.
Hello. Good morning.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for making time.
No problem. It's nice to be here.
What will be the focus of your lecture tomorrow?
I'll be talking about older adults living in the community that might have cognitive changes and how we can think about diet as a way to make sure you have good brain health. And as people age and might have dementia, some of the challenges that people might have around food and eating and what can be emphasized to support caregivers and persons with dementia.
Are we talking about nutrition after diagnosis, or maybe nutrition in an effort to prevent dementia?
Both, actually. And it's actually the same diet that we want to propose that would help the brain. What supports brain health before and after diagnosis is the same. But after diagnosis, we start to see other things that are nutritional challenges, like weight loss or eating challenges, that can be difficult then for caregivers to manage. So we'll talk about those as well.
Can you give us some bare bones idea about what that diet looks like?
Sure. And so I actually am going to be emphasizing the Brain Health Food Guide, which actually came out of Canada. It's a Baycrest Center in Toronto that developed this wonderful diet. It's very similar to the Mediterranean diet or the MIND diet or the DASH diet. They all have very common, similar emphases in terms of components. So lots of fruits and vegetables, for example, lean proteins, preferably not red meat and processed meats, lean dairy products, so 1% milk, low-fat cheese, that sort of thing. But lots of fruits and vegetables, specifically vegetables that are leafy greens that have lots of phytochemicals as well as key nutrients for our brain and our body. And then finally, olive oil as a key oil, but also other oils that are also healthy, like canola oil.
How has some of the work done, whether it be at the Malnutrition Task Force, and I know there was other studies into diets at long-term care facilities, have they been widely incorporated into the meal plans, in whether it be long-term care or otherwise? Because if the work has been done, because we hear people complain about food in long-term care, complain about food at the hospital, but to your knowledge, have we incorporated the work done by those various task forces into these settings?
Not as well as we could, that's for sure. And so it's a long road to make change, as you well know, in institutions. Certainly the work that we've done with the Canadian Malnutrition Task Force to demonstrate the importance of malnutrition, we're seeing uptake in terms of better processes of care. But the food itself is a challenging area. We tend not to emphasize food in hospitals the way we should in terms of investing in it as a way to prevent or help recovery of a patient. We see it as more of hospitality, unfortunately. And so we have to convince our administrators in hospitals to value food and see it as medicine to help the patient recover. In long-term care, I think people recognize the importance of food. The challenge there is the cost of food, of course, is always going up, and our budgets don't seem to always match that. And we tend not to have the same level of when it comes to thinking about staffing that needs to make high quality food. We don't necessarily have that in long-term care homes. And so we end up having to pre-purchase or purchase pre-made food that might not be as nutritious. The other key challenge of long-term care is the diversity of people that are there for the rest of their lives, right? And so cultural diversities, as well as what they might need to eat. It's really challenging to be able to meet the needs of all the people in long-term care in terms of nutrition. For example, some people might have be from a different cultural group, and their preferred foods are not easy to accommodate. Or someone might have require pureed food, and making high-quality pureed food is not easy to do. That is appealing and nutritious for folks. So there's lots of challenges, and so the research is a good start to show we need to make improvements. We're seeing some small changes, but we still have a long way to go.
I know your expertise is inside geriatric nutrition, so can you help us understand the appreciable difference adopting this diet would be, say, post-diagnosis?
Sure. And so post-diagnosis, as I said, we tend to see things like weight loss and eating challenges. That becomes more important than the actual diet that might prevent dementia. But in the early stages of post-diagnosis, there isn't actually a lot of research to show that eating well prevents further deterioration. It's more around weight loss and making sure you're not losing weight. But there's no reason why we'd think the brain would be different post-diagnosis, that things like olive oil and lots of fruits and vegetables and lean protein still would not benefit the brain as they do before diagnosis. But when thinking about weight loss, for example, when you start to have eating challenges, as someone progresses in their trajectory of having dementia, you then start to see malnutrition. And then we have to flip over and think about, okay, how do we nourish this person? Because we do know that when they lose weight, they tend to have greater progression in dementia, and caregiver stress and burden also increase dramatically. So if we can keep that person eating to prevent that weight loss, that is a benefit to them.
This might be a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is it the same nutritional guide applicable to early onset versus later in life diagnosis?
I would say not. I would say that later life, we would want to emphasize higher fat foods, perhaps anything that the person may eat and eat it readily. So, for example, later stages, people have dysphagia, which is a swelling problem. So getting anything into folks is more important than emphasizing, for example, kale, which you might want to emphasize in the early stages because of its phytochemicals and nutrients, right? And so then it becomes important about safety, what they can eat without choking and aspirating, and then second, getting enough in so they don't lose more weight and become malnourished. So it does shift in terms of focus. We then would have more energy-dense foods. We'd make sure foods are safe to eat, and they want to eat them as well. Caregivers will tell you that often persons with dementia will refuse to eat. And so getting anything into them is important rather than just, as I said, the nutritious things like kale and fruits and vegetables.
This might be slightly outside your bailiwick, but I'm going to go ahead and probe it anyway. It's the forecasted increase in the number of people who will be diagnosed and living with dementia in this country. They talk about a 187% rise by 2050, which equals about 1.7, 1.8 million Canadians living with dementia. So whether it be on the nutrition front or in the healthcare system itself, it seems to me that the forecast has been out there a long time, but baby steps have been taken. You know, small pots of money from the federal government and the provincial government and websites websites with tips and the like. But preparing for what we see right in front of us doesn't seem to have taken hold. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there are some improvements for sure. And so, for example, colleagues of myself at the University of Waterloo, we received some funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada around a wellness program for persons living with dementia. And it involves exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress management, that sort of thing. So we're seeing those pockets of interventions being developed, but certainly post-diagnosis, we don't have the same amount of effort being put into research and into interventions as pre-diagnosis. So there seems to be a lot of work around and research around preventing dementia, but not post-dementia. So certainly people want to stay in the community as long as they can, not go into long-term care home. Caregivers need support, and so we do need to think about developing programs and interventions to support them for sure.
Academics like yourself would obviously have an intimate understanding of the topic, and not to be mean-spirited, but sometimes it just feels like politicians without that built-in professional expertise and background maybe can't wrap their mind around it. If you had to give some, easily crafted messages for politicians to recognize exactly what's happening today and what the forecast is into the future, how would you craft that message? Because we can read the numbers, and I'm a layperson, so I don't know exactly what the strategy should be, but it really feels like politicians sometimes aren't armed with the background and the understanding that you would have. What would your message be?
Well, my message would be to post-diagnosis that there is hope and that people can live well with dementia, but they do need support. And it's not an automatic thinking about people. It's the end of their life and they're going to long-term care. People can live with hope who have dementia, and we need to figure out how to support them and caregivers to live as well as they can for as long as they can.
I appreciate your time this morning. Do you have the details of the lecture, the time, and the location offhand?
I believe it's tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Bruno Center. And the talk is on nutrition, dementia, and living well.
I have some additional information in front of me that I'll add for the listener, and it's open to the general public. So, as mentioned, 7 p.m. at the Bruno Center in room IIC 2001. This is on the St. John's campus. It will be broadcast online. There's a link at the Mun's Gazette. There's going to be a reception afterwards. There's parking available in lot number 17, and you are going to be delivering a seminar on the same topic Wednesday, April 23rd at 1 p.m. in the Education Building at 1014, room 1014. I appreciate you making time for the conversation this morning, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye. It's Dr. Heather Keller offering a pretty important lecture. I put these numbers out there every so often. So whether it be preparation, like we talked about with the Seniors Advocate yesterday, for aging in place or aging at home versus long-term care facility, we understand the aging demographic. And as you age, it increases the likelihood of getting a dementia diagnosis. And young adults, there's also the forecasted numbers there. They're talking about living under the age of 65 with dementia. In 2020, it was about 28,000. They're estimating some 40,000 by 2050. And that hits me in a very soft spot. Just lost a dear friend of mine to early onset dementia, diagnosed at the age of 47. So I guess I'd like to offer condolences to the friends and family of Pam Byrne, who died yesterday as a result. And terrible news, and obviously a terrible disease. Let's take a break. When we come back, Dennis is there to talk about water bombers, and then we're speaking with you on a topic of your choosing. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Dennis, you're on the air.
Hello, Betty.
Good morning.
I heard a guy talk about the water bombers.
Yep.
I was 28, or now I'm 42. Was with the Navy SEAL Captain Unit 6 14 years ago. And I'm still in the military. And one of my courses they paid for was the water bomber in Halifax. I passed the course and did my job. And then after I did my job, I got on Air Canada. When we flew off, short after going to Toronto, going home, the two the pilots on Air Canada passed out. I took over the Air Canada plane and got it to Toronto safely with a flight attendant. I just wanted to say, Patty, that we need water bombers in Newfoundland.
Dennis, can you just take a step back and tell me that story about what you did on an Air Canada flight? I think I might have misheard that or misinterpreted. What happened?
Okay. After my Halifax water bomber course for the military, I went back home on an Air Canada. The two passengers, or the two flight attendants, the two pilots passed out on the Air Canada, and I flew to Air Canada to Toronto.
When was this?
This was, it should be on records in the Halifax to Toronto, because the military in Toronto was there in the Toronto airport. This was like, I'm 42 now. I recently turned 42, and this was when I was 28, 27 years old.
Remarkable story. What kind of aircraft was it?
It was a regular water bomber, and the last convoy plane. I drove the convoy plane, the last one with the military.
Amazing.
And this is how I got to drive the Halifax water bomber. I put out the fire, and then I do 2 flights of that, and then I land the plane on the Halifax water bomber. I don't know if it's there now. Her body was retired. Said I flew it and I took out the fire, and this should be on file, or you can find it up on the internet. It would be Navy SEAL Team Leader D, Attachment Unit 6.
Interesting. I'll have a look, and I appreciate the time. Insofar as we need another water bomber, back in 2018...
we need a big place in Newfoundland to take care of Newfoundland and St. John's and around the bays. You know what I mean?
Sure I do. Dennis, I appreciate the time. Thanks for calling.
Okay, bye.
All the best. Bye-bye. Oops, that was a bit quick. On the water bomber conversation, it's long been confusing, right? Back in 2018, what was people refer to as our 5th water bomber was damaged. Hit a rock when it was trying to scoop some water, and so it's been out of commission ever since. Then there's been the back and forth about fixing the aircraft and, going through insurance, and the premium was too high, or the deductible was so high that they didn't pursue it. Then they tried to sell it, and it's sort of kind of still up in the air as exactly what's going to go on. But also, in addition to some of that confusion, we were been told that the province can operate quite well and we don't necessarily need a 5th water bomber, which I'm not so sure if that makes a whole lot of sense to me, given the fact that we had 5. So someone at some point in history, or some point in time, thought we needed 5. But now, because there's been some confusion about what to do with that damaged aircraft, that we all of a sudden don't need 5, I'm not so sure that makes any sense, but if we once needed 5, I think we probably still need 5. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm very well. How about you?
I'm doing okay. I'm just calling in hoping that you can give me some answers to some questions.
Okay.
I stopped into the hub on Mary Meeting Road yesterday with my great aunt, who is in a wheelchair. That was her designated area to vote. And when I went in there, I was quite shocked at how deplorable the conditions were. So I'm questioning why the place is still open. The place had smelled like sewer. There was water dripping from just about every ceiling as I went in there on the first floor. I went in to use the washroom. I couldn't use the washroom. There was something stopped up there. So we have to get into an elevator to go up to the second floor to vote. So my question is, this is a disabled service center for people with disabilities. There's a ramp on the outside of this building that I wouldn't even trust a butterfly to land on. So when I was there yesterday, if there had been a fire and my great aunt was on the second floor, how in the world was she supposed to get out of that building? We went up in an elevator. When there's a fire, you are not supposed to use an elevator. The ramps are deplorable. You wouldn't even be able to, I'm not even joking. I don't know if you've drove by and seen that building lately, but it really needs to be condemned. And I'm wondering why it's still open. Do they not get regular visits from the fire department who do inspections to make sure the place is still up and running properly?
I would think so, yes. But I can't answer as to why it's still open, nor can I even remember the last time I was in the hub. We do speak with its executive director here on the show every now and then.
Right.
So I can put that to him. But when it comes to Elections Canada, my understanding is that they implemented this Accessible Canada Act. It's actually part of the legislation regarding accessibility. So I would have thought if Elections Canada has that as part of the law governing elections, that they would do inspections, that they would ensure that the polling stations would be accessible to all. So I can follow up with both. I can contact Elections Canada about their inspection protocols. I can also go directly to the hub and ask the province about, the frequency of inspections of these public buildings. So I can do all three. I
really appreciate that.
No problem.
Because you only need to look at the building on the outside and know that those ramps are not usable. I mean, they're falling down. The wood is rotted. They're coming from the building. So, I mean, I can't help but wonder how somebody in a wheelchair is going to get out of that building.
I honestly can't answer the question, but I will do the aforementioned follow-up about, because
appreciate you.
When we talk about Elections Canada, one of the key issues here that we have to understand is they are solely responsible for picking where the polling stations are. And this year, my polling station has changed. Why? I have no idea. But I'll find out what their inspection protocol looks like, because that can speak to a variety of things. If they think it passes the accessibility smell test for them, then I wonder how that jibes with the province. And I'll find out both.
Appreciate you so much. You have a wonderful day, and I'll be listening.
The very same to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye-bye. Fair enough. Honest to God, I can't remember the last time I was in the hub. We did some print work there. Man, that must be like 2 decades ago. So I'm not really sure, but we can reach out to Mr. Badcock and speak to some of the concerns voiced by that lady about the state of the ramps and whether it be leaks and whatever the case may be, and some of the inspection protocols that may or may not be in place. To that end, and it's just popped into my mind, still waiting to understand where the investigation is regarding the fire at the Driftwood Inn in Deer Lake. It's a long time ago now. I know investigations take time. Completely understand. But when you heard the initial reports of no fire suppression, no lighting, no alarms going off, of course, a man died. And if it wasn't for the quick thinking and the courage of one woman to go around banging on doors, it could have been much, much worse. We're not even sure who the owners are. And like I've said in the past, when things like this happen, we need to know a bunch of things. What the inspections looked like, what the result of the inspections were, whether or not the building was in compliance to the variety of the codes that should be applied. And generally, when something like this happens, very quickly, without saying a whole lot, because there's going to be a pending investigation, for the owners to come out and say, anything general about what happened, and they're going to cooperate with the authorities, we haven't heard any of that. The silence is deafening. There's got to be some understanding about where we are in that investigation. If it hasn't been concluded, that's one thing. But you would think that it would be wrapped up by now. Let's take a break. In reaction to what we just heard from that lady and her voting experience with her great aunt at the hub, the executive director of the hub is Tom Badcock. He's in the queue, and then we're speaking with you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the executive director at the hub. That's Tom Badcock. Good morning, Tom. You're on the air.
Thank you, Patty. I didn't hear the call. I was on the phone actually to Councillor Davis about people getting tickets here during the election, and Councillor Ridgely when Dave called me. That the lady was referring to asbestos, Dave relayed to me. That's our emergency exit ramp. And if the person had just proceeded 10 feet past, they would have seen the main entrance come in, taken the elevator up to vote. There were lots of signs and all those things there indicating where the entrance was, but obviously the woman didn't see them. So what we've done now since your call, we posted signs there saying emergency exit only. And when the main election is here on the 28th, I will put even more signs out there saying that this is where the main entrance is and this is where they should go to vote. So all I can do is apologize to the lady and say, well, hopefully she'll be able to get her on election day and vote.
Okay, I think they did make their way into the building. She described being inside. So just help me understand, is the emergency exit ramp in poor condition, as she described? She said that, she wouldn't trust a butterfly to land on it, I think was the phrase she used.
Well, she's not wrong. It's in a state of disrepair. We're trying to get it repaired. We had a grant process through the city to be able to actually take it out of there and replace it with something better, but that fell through because I couldn't get a contractor to give me a price. So yeah, it's something that could be used to exit the building, and of course it won't collapse or anything. But actually going up it and things like one portion of the ramp up to the third floor, for example, how it ever got approved to be put there, no one knows, because you can't even walk down over it. But the other parts of the ramp, yeah, it's in disrepair. But we have signs to that effect there saying, like, we leave it open simply because if there is some kind of an emergency, at least you can get out. But it always has been an emergency exit only. Even in the building, you'll see the signs for the doors that go out to it saying emergency exit, don't use it. But they have panic bars on it, and we can't lock them because of fire regulations. But yeah, she's right. It is in the state of disrepair.
And how about the main ramp out front?
We don't have a main ramp outside. To get into our building right now is ground level. You just come in through, you push the button, automatic door, come in, go up, take the elevator, and go up to where you have to go. Yeah. So.
She also made reference to what she described as leaky roof and leaky ceilings wherever she went.
Well, what we had, was we had a water boiler break, and I replaced that yesterday. So it's just a comedy of errors. We have had a bit of a leak around our entrance. That it's a nagging leak that we're trying to repair. But the other leak was down on another part of the building where the water boiler burst. And as a matter of fact, as I said, we replaced that yesterday, bought a new boiler and put it in. And then the other part of the thing was our ice machine. Somebody jarred the ice machine, and the drain was causing a leak. So when you got a building this size, there's always a problem. But where the woman had to go to vote to get into the elevator, I don't see any issues unless she was going around the building looking for leaks. So I don't know, but again, that was the major issue we had yesterday, was the hot water boiler breaking. So.
Unfortunate timing. I also made mention of things, when we're talking about egress and the sanitary nature of a building and the quality of ramps and the quality of elevator services. What does the inspection protocol look like at the hub? Like, who comes in and what do they inspect, and what have the results been?
Oh, the fire department are here regularly. We have an elevator maintenance program. As a matter of fact, now we got a $10,000 upgrade that's supposed to be starting any day now on our elevator system. But the fire department makes its annual inspections and advises us of any shortcomings. Because we have a food service license, we get regular food service inspections. So whatever the protocols are for inspections, we follow them. And if we're observed about having any shortcomings, we certainly correct them.
I appreciate making time. Tom, on a different topic, I know you were hosting a meeting regarding the disability tax credit, had some health professionals and some tax professionals on hand. How did it go?
That was excellent meeting. We had some great people here. I've been fielding calls. I think I got 2 this morning, as a matter of fact, from people who couldn't attend. It was a great meeting. A lot of people, we answered the questions for them. We were able to provide the forms to people who wanted copies of the forms. The major issue, of course, was the fact that people weren't aware of a lot of the benefits of having the disability tax credit, and confusion over the $400 that the province will be giving to people with disabilities based on income level starting in July. And the other big issue, of course, was people having access to medical professionals to be able to assess them and to sign the forms for them. So we had a lady there from an agency who is a go-between and who was able to access a medical professional and link people up so they could sign the forms. And for people who weren't able to afford the $199 fee if they didn't have a family doctor, then we were making accommodations to be able to pay that for them so that there would be no reason why a person with a disability could not access everything that they needed. Because that was, as I say, that was the big issue people had. Well, they don't have a family doctor, and even if they do have a family doctor or psychiatrist, psychologist, or all the people who can sign these forms, they didn't have the money to be able to pay for it. But we made accommodations for that. And, on a scale of 1 to 10, in my opinion, it was a 10 meeting. It went very well.
And I know I've directed many people on to you, that they've contacted me, but I'm not surprised, but it is somewhat concerning that so many Canadians who actually are eligible for this benefit, and everything starts with the tax credit before you get into the other benefits, whether it be the savings plan and the monthly check. I was going to call it an allowance, but that's not fair. But so many people that have contacted me, and I've just simply sent them links, and they get back to me and say, I had no earthly idea, and now I've been approved, which is amazing.
Yeah, I know. The government has been somewhat bad in this regard, and not promoting this a little better so people would know about it. Like a lot of the questions I got about the $400 from the province was, is it taxable? And no, it's not taxable. Do I have to make an application for it? No, you don't have to make an application for it. Will this affect my social assistance if I'm on social assistance? No, it won't affect your social assistance. So you might be able to find all those questions online, but for me, I go right to the Disability Policy Office and I ask those questions and I say, these are the questions I have, and I will relay them. But, I shouldn't have to. Those type of things should be more out in the, everybody should know those things, publish them somehow and make them clearer to people. But again, as I say, the $400 will not affect your social assistance, and it's not taxable, and you don't have to apply for it, but you do need to have the disability tax credit form approved by Remicana.
Last one, and this is a follow-up question from the lady who called to prompt this conversation. What is the evacuation protocol if and when there's a fire on the second floor?
We have an alarm system here in this building that is for all disabilities. In other words, it's very, very loud. There's flashing lights. There's all of those things. Now, of course, people will come down the stairs who can use the stairs. You don't use the elevator. They would use that outside ramp in an emergency, but people in chairs that didn't feel comfortable with that, we have a special type of chair that a person in a wheelchair is put into and brought down over those stairs. And that's how they get out of the building. So, but again, the ramp itself right now, I have no problem going up and down. I have no problem going up and down in a wheelchair. It's just that it doesn't look very good, and it does need some repairs. We've been ongoing with regular repairs on it, but it does need more repairs.
I appreciate the time, Tom. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks for the call. Okay, we'll talk.
All the best. Bye-bye. It's Tom Badcock, Executive Director at the Hub. I think we got the follow-up questions that we were intending to get to, Tom. I think we did anyway. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to say good morning to the member for Torngat Mountains. That's Leila Evans. Talk about Lark Harbour. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Leila Evans is the PC member for Torngat Mountains and joins us on line number 1. Good morning, Leila. You're on the air.
Thanks for having me on, Paddy. I'm not sure if you've had any people on earlier talking about the Baltic 3. I know it's been in the news and the media with the tar balls showing up on shore in nearby beaches.
I've talked about it a couple of times. We did have some conversation with the FFAW representative this morning, so it's on my radar, put it that way. Before we move on to what's not being done and what needs to be done, have you by chance seen any of the pictures of what they're referring to as these tennis ball-sized tar balls?
Yeah, I've only seen them through the media reports.
Okay, fair enough. So, we know that there's been some conversations and requests made to the federal government, specifically the Coast Guard, requests made to the company, which are obviously on the cheap, and they will not foot the bill when it should be pollute or pay every single time on every single issue. What's your thoughts on the Baltic 3 and the Lark Harbour concern?
Well, I think right now it really would help people. People are concerned about the potential spill and the damage to the fishery and the ecosystems if we had a bit more transparency. And what I mean by that, Patty, is like, what's the plan and what's the timelines? Because it is concerning. We had the mayor of Lark Harbour on there talking about, upgrades to the ATV trail would help be able to do a land-based salvage and recovery. But that doesn't seem to be happening. So people are concerned that maybe there's not much action. But, until they actually comes forward, with Coast Guard, the company, and maybe the insurance company, and talks about the plan to actually do the salvage and recovery and make sure that, all the hazardous materials are going to be removed, people will not know. And when you start to see things like tar balls, people get concerned because we do have a history of having ships go aground and sink where we've actually failed to respond in a timely manner in the past, and it's impacted the environment. So I think what people are looking for right now is some assurances.
Fair enough. And it's a massive undertaking, though, too, because, it's not just the litres of fuel, it's all the lubricants and otherwise that if indeed something breaks or it gets toppled, then who knows what can leak into the Bay of Islands. So we're talking, I think the number is 1.7 million litres of fuel still on board. So to get that off is obviously a major undertaking. And I'm not defending the Coast Guard because I think this needs to be done to its sweet. You mentioned history and what we've seen regarding ships run aground and not cleaned up in a timely fashion. The Manola Cell wrecked in Change Islands in 1985. We just dealt with it a couple of years ago.
But in actual fact, though, Patty, this is, I guess, before I was MHA, I was a biologist and environmental person, so this is sort of my field. And I was listening to Bruce English there from Coast Guard on talking about it, and I think he said 1,600 metric tons, which works out to be about 1.6 million liters. That's a large volume. And of course, where the ship is resting, is at risk of actually, being lifted off the bottom and breaking apart and creating an environmental disaster, for lack of a better phrase. But that being said, now is you talked about the Manola Cell. She ran aground in 1985, and I remember that. And it wasn't until 2013 when she started leaking. There was evidence of leaking, and she probably was leaking before that any action was taken. And it wasn't until 2018 that they finalized the cleanup. But that was a different time. And what I'm talking about is a federal legislation that came in 2017. The Erect, Abandoned, and Hazardous Vessels Act, and that allows the government to act to hold companies accountable. But Patty, yesterday being Earth Day, let's tie it all together now. Yesterday being Earth Day, we're looking across the world on a global scale and seeing the impacts of pollution, whether it's into the atmosphere that's creating global warming, or looking at our oceans where all the debris is now starting to impact not only the fish in the oceans, but basically the beaches and the land. So for us, I think Canada has to ensure that, every company is managing its footprint. And if you look at ships in the ocean, what are they carrying? And do they have the means to effectively do a response to prevent and mitigate impacts to the ocean? And we look at the company now, Mediterranean Shipping Company, one of the largest shipping companies in the world. They have the resources and the means and insurance. And I'm sure, they've also hired 2 companies. But what Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want is to see what's the plan and what's the timelines. Because if there's a failure to actually take any action or have a plan in place, and something happens, who's going to pay? It's going to be our fishery. It's going to be the communities that's going to suffer the impact and the environmental damage done to the oceans and the beaches. So for me, what I'm saying is, where's the federal government on this? Where's the provincial government on this? Because right now, it's a prime time to make sure that we're holding companies accountable, and we need to see action now, right? We need to see the plan in place. To me, it's kind of shocking that they haven't come out and told the local people of the area what steps are being taken.
Fair. So, and we have to paint worst case scenario because that's what's being considered here. So if it's 1.7 million litres of fuel, the wreck cleanup cost would vary based on severity, the location and access and things, but it could cost billions of dollars to clean up. So that has to be factored in. And even after the direct cleanup, wildlife rehabilitation, the full restoration of ecosystems, which takes years and years and millions and millions and millions of dollars. So the worst case scenario paints a very clear picture here. It needs to be attended to right away.
But also too is you hear the mayor of Loch Harbour on there, and he's calling for action. He wants to see some results because that's his area. We see Don Street, from the FAW on because of the fishery. So the thing is, right now, in order to hold everybody accountable, Coast Guard, the federal government, the company responsible for the wreck, the only way we're going to be able to hold them accountable is if we know what the action plan is. Right? I mean, so I think they should hold a news conference. I think Coast Guard should be up there. The company should be up there. Somebody, from the insurance company and saying, this is what we're doing to reassure us. Because, when you look at the Malta cell, that went on for years. It was only when the spills became visible that the federal government stepped up. So, I think right now, we can't trust people to be doing things behind the scenes. I think we need to have more transparency, and we need them to come out and tell us what the action is, because our fishery has suffered enough. Local communities have suffered enough. And if ships are going to be, sailing in our waters, we want to make sure that they're held accountable.
Obviously. I appreciate the time, Leila. Thanks for doing it.
Yep, thank you very much. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Leila Evans is the PC member for the Torngat Mountains. Before we get to the news, one more. Line number 2. Mary, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. How about you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm calling about my cat. Last week, Luca, I called on air. Corner Brook, I'm calling from.
I remember the call.
Yes, Patty. And my cat came back, and now I have my other one missing, Jimmy. Jimmy got out last night.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mary. Yes, you're up, you're down.
Too. I know.
So they're sneaky little cats.
And I can't do much about it today because I'm at work. And it's the same area, Boland's Avenue. We moved there 2 weeks ago.
All right, keep an eye out for Jimmy. Describe Jimmy to the listener.
Jimmy is a beautiful, friendly cat. Jimmy is about a year old. He's white, and he got brown into him. He's neutered, and also he got a patch onto his nose and big green eyes. Beautiful cat, my son.
So, Luca, I think that's the other cat's name. Did it just come back on his own, or someone found him?
Luca came back after I was talking to you that day. In the afternoon, my husband and I, when we got off of work, we went out and we were down by the woods singing out his name. We believe that he may have been down by the fish plant into the blue building. And when he heard us singing out, Luca, and my husband was there, puss, puss, puss. He went and came home about shortly after, 10 o'clock at night. Well, my God, it was like a prayer sent.
Well, I'm glad, and hopefully Jimmy makes his way back to the house as well.
I just hope and pray, because we're close to the road, right? And we only moved down recently, and you don't know the area, and that's what I'm worried about.
Right.
So if anybody see Jimmy, can you please give me a call? And a small reward is offered. We love our cats. We have 3.
What's your telephone number, Mary?
It's 709-216-1251.
Fingers crossed. Good luck.
Thank you.
You're
I'll
welcome.
let you know for sure.
Thanks, Mary.
You take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, you know the deal. We're speaking with you. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 1. Mary, you're on the air.
Hi, yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I have a story. I came home to Newfoundland in 2023 after having the battle of my life with breast cancer in Ontario, right in the midst of COVID. And I came home to Newfoundland and I applied for a family doctor like you're supposed to, and I had a 2-year wait, like you have to be pregnant or something to have a doctor. So in that process, my drugs that was given to me to prevent the cancer from spreading or from, all of those pills that I was supposed to take to stop the cancer from spreading or to shrink cancers, I couldn't get because no doctor would take me on as their patient. So I went months and months and months without doctors. Then maybe last April, I started to get sick, and I still had no doctor, so I used to end up at one of the local hospitals many times at the hospital almost on a daily basis with chest pains and high blood pressure and whatnot. And they'd do EKG, and they'd send me away and say, your heart is fine. And I'd say, well, it's in my ribs. Can you please do an X-ray? No X-ray's done. So then finally it came to the point that the nurses used to say, find someone to talk to. It's all in your head. It's all anxiety, yada, yada, yada. So in October, a doctor at one of the hospitals decided to do a CT scan, and my anxiety and my symptoms was my breast cancer without my medications and whatnot, I'm assuming, was after spreading to my spine. So I had requested from patient relations and whatever to explain to me what went on. And I've been waiting from last April with letters to the Premier, to patient relations, to the hospitals, to see why I fell through the cracks. And I'm told that I'm not allowed to say names, but I will tell you that I was also told by medical professionals to tell my story. You need to tell your story. There's too many women falling through the cracks. So in October, I was diagnosed with a spot on my spine. So they said, you have a spot on your spine, cancer. So I went through treatment. And then I said to my doctor, well, I have one spot. I guess when they scanned me, they're telling me I only have one spot of cancer in my body. Well, that's, there's not much I could do about it, but we're looking at the overall picture, and you should see my portal, that medical portal with a massive amount of mistakes. We're not even going there on the phone. I said to my doctor, I said, so I have one spot of cancer. I can't take that miracle drug until the cancer spreads. And then she said, well, no, you were only scanned to your ribs. And I'm thinking, oh, bloody hell, you mean to say that it could be somewhere else? So I waited 3 months for a CT scan that I found out last week. Oh, well, we just found a mass on your ovary. You could have ovarian cancer. I'm thinking to myself, if you're a doctor and I'm your patient and I'm coming to you with cancer on my finger, would you not look and see if it was anywhere else in my body? And don't you think that I've been through enough this past year? And I am not lying to you, Mr. Daly. I cannot name names, but I am told by medical professionals, tell your story. Go on Open Lines, go on CBC, tell your story. There's too many women falling through the cracks. There's too many women being told that it's all in their head. I went to doctors that told me to eat CBD gummies. They gave me antihistamines. I cried all night with pain, 19, 20 hours with pain in my spine, to be 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, to be given a lorazepam like a slap in the mouth. And when the doctor said to me, "I'm sorry you fell through the cracks. A crack is no good. I want my answers." So I'm calling you to ask you if there's anybody out there that can give me my answers of what happened. I'm not the only one. I'm told that I'm not. My story is no different than a lot of people.
Just let me ask you a question. So did you say that you were able to get a family doctor, but they refused to take you on? Did you say that at one point?
I went to many doctors. I went to many doctors in St. John's. And because I didn't have a family doctor, they would not take me on. So that means I couldn't get my medications. So that is so ironic, because if you ran out of your medications and you were in Ontario, you'd go to a doctor and he'd write your tamoxifen or whatever you needed. I couldn't get my pills. I went over a year without my pills.
Yeah. It's a terrible situation, and I'm obviously really sorry to hear it. I don't know.
I just signed my death warrant. I need my answers, and I need for never to happen to another woman. Never, never. When you go into a hospital and you're telling the doctor that I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I'm looking in my portal. I'm looking inside my, you know what I'm talking about, the medical portal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at the radiologist questioning the doctor, saying I could see the radiation burns from my breast cancer surgery I had in Ontario. I could see your axilla and the clips, but you have marked here she had no radiation. And you have had marked here that she had a mole removed. Did this person have cancer? And I'm thinking, oh, wow. That was May of 2024, and because I was going from one doctor to another, I was getting no results, and I still don't have no results, because every time I call patient relations, they tell you 3 days and nobody gets back to you. So I wish I could on Open Line tell you that I have been told by doctors and specialists and technicians to tell my story. My story is not unique. It may be a little bit different than somebody else's, but women are more or less looked at as emotional creatures. So you end up at the hospital, you got pain, or they look at you as having anxiety. And I remember sitting in the OR, sitting in the emergency room all night. And I remember saying to the nurse, "I'm in so much pain." He said, "You've been like that for a year." And I said, "They just found a spot on my spine." And he said, "Now that we know you're sick, we'll treat you better."
Mary, I'm sorry to hear this. If anyone has anything to help you or to guide you or some advice or to help...
I need my answers.
Understood.
And I need for never to happen to another woman. Never to happen to another woman.
Mary, I wish you well. Take good care of yourself. If we can do anything to help you out, we're more than happy to do it.
Well, I need for somebody to reach that CEO, whoever he is, because nobody else is answering my question.
Thank you for your time.
And if I could help another woman, if I could help save another woman, then I did my job, eh?
100%. Mary, I wish you well. Thank you for your time. Take good care.
You're kindly welcome.
All the best. Bye-bye. All right, let's take that break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Caller, you're on the air. That's you.
Yes. I was just calling about generalities about people that are, shall we say, on top of the hill and taking a look at life in the way that it is. Living in a world that as we grow through life and we get in a senior citizen state, we get all kinds of pills and medication to help us for another year, another 2 years. I have compassion for senior citizens, being one myself, and I always had compassion for senior citizens. I love fishing. I like to go in by the brook and catch those beautiful trout. And when I go in, I had 3 trips in an ambulance because I overexerted myself and things. But what do? Lay down on the couch and say, well, I need a doctor to help me. My doctor got to keep me going. But, you know, how long are we going to keep going? Life is beautiful, but we're not promised that we're going to live forever, you know? And every day is a moment that we should cherish. I know that there's a lot of people out there that have not had the opportunity to have the right things done. Never got the opportunity to smell the roses, as it were. And there is a time that we're in a situation where the care bears are not around anymore. We had a bunch of politicians that were latchkey kids that came home from school, had to get the key out of the mailbox, and let themselves in and grab a cold bite to eat until mom and dad came home from work. Now, going back 50 years ago, mom would be home making bread, baking beans, cooking meals, but it's not that way anymore. You know, things have changed a lot over the years. But, you know, I think there's some semblance in family values. And I think that dignity and respect and looking back on life and looking ahead for every precious moment that we have. I thank you, Patty, for listening to me.
I appreciate the time. So, you know, interestingly, you talk about decades ago, it was quite common where you'd come home and in those days, most likely it was mom at home and taking care of the kids and taking care of the home and those types of things. There's kind of pretty obvious reasons why things have changed, though, isn't there? I mean, gone are the days when the husband, unless he is a surgeon or something making massive money, gone are the days where the man could go to work at the phone company for 35 years. They could afford a home on that salary. They could afford a car on that salary. They could put their kids in college on that salary. Those days are way behind us. That's one of the prominent reasons why things have changed, is unless, again, you have a real huge earner as either the husband or the wife, 2-income families are just the norm. I mean, you cannot survive on a one-person salary, once again, unless someone's making the big, big dollars. So that's really what's forced some of this change. And the thought process that women have about their role. Women want to be independent. They want to work. They want to have their own money. They want to be, able to fend for themselves, not have to rely on anybody else to take care of them, as was once the general school of thought. I think those things have just changed culturally as much as financially.
We say two salary families in a half a salary world.
Well said. Well said.
I mean, the two people cannot earn as much as one person did when they had the old potato field, the chicken field, the cows in the barn, and being self-supportive, doing what they could. You never see ambulances traveling back and forth over the road when a bag of potato chips wasn't available at the corner store. You would get an apple or an orange, and sure, the oranges were the only things that had a bit of nourishment. And you had things that were that I can't explain. You took natural things for instance, if you got caught with an axe, you took the bar off of a fir tree, and you plastered that up over your cot, and get up and go on again. It's not the same anymore, but not meaning that is not beautiful. The only thing that's not beautiful, I'll put it this way: we had farmers, we had fishermen, we had all kinds of things going. And then along came industry and the CNR tracks, and everybody left their farms, they left their fishing. They went to the CNR for their God. And then the fisheries, in this town here in Brigus, we had a multitude of people working. We had the Eckhart mills that had 300 people on their payroll. We had fishing plants. We had forges. We had stores on every corner. We had schools. And in Brigus now, we have tourism. You know, things have changed, and things will change, but unfortunately, we got to go along with the tide. And when it comes time to lay down and have a rest, well, then our time is done. You know, we can't overcook it. We can only accept and take what is passed along, and away we go. Now, not saying what's passed along that we don't be good workers. I had many people working for me in a lifetime. I built many good structures, many good houses. And I always tried to help my fellow men. I guess that's about all I can say, Paddy.
It was a mouthful, and I appreciate it very much. Thanks for calling this morning.
All the best.
Take good care. Bye-bye. And, you know, of course, there are external pressures brought to bear, and it can be, you know, the world of inequality and what government policy might not line up with your hopes or aspirations and those types of things. And not to be corny, but life is kind of what you make of it, for the most part. Because, as I mentioned, there's lots of external pressures that are out of your control that will have a potential negative or positive influence in your world, in your life. But there's a lot to the fact that it is really what you make of it as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get a response from the City of St. John's Ward 3 Councillor Greg Noseworthy on a call we had from a fellow up on Cowan Heights regarding an abandoned house. And then we're speaking with you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Ward 3 Councillor in the City of St. John's. That's Greg Noseworthy. Greg, you're on the air.
Paddy, good morning. How are you today, sir?
Very well. How about you?
I'm doing excellent. Listen, it's beautiful weather, no snow. It's not bad for April, eh?
Not bad at all. The last couple of days are pretty dreary, but nice to see the sun shining today. Can't wait to get out in it, to be honest.
Good. So listen, Paddy, I just wanted to respond. I know there was a caller who was speaking with you earlier today about a derelict property in Cowan Heights. And I just wanted to chat a little bit generally about that and, of course, offer to the gentleman to reach out to myself. We have a number of bylaws within the City of St. John's that help us deal with property standards. And that can be from something, say, you know, garbage and trash strewn about throughout the property, or it could be something where, the property is completely abandoned. We have those mechanisms under our bylaws and regulations to help deal with this. And although it's not super common, it does happen from time to time where we do have to issue notices to residents. And I really just want to hammer home that point that if folks are finding that they've got derelict properties in their neighborhood, for whatever circumstance, that they should be reaching out either to their ward councillor, like myself for Cowan Heights, Mundy Palm, Waterford Valley, or the other ward councillors, at-large councillors, and also our access, our 311, so that these can be logged. Now, and I know in this particular circumstance, the gentleman had mentioned he had been speaking with the city a couple of times, so I do want to invite him to give me a call or send me an email, because obviously I only got in November, so I haven't had as much time and familiarity with all the files, but I do want to put that out there if anybody has been dealing with something for some time, that I'm just as available as I always am to help work on these files.
So, I mean, it does beg the question, not necessarily of you, because you're a newly elected councillor and don't represent his part of the city, but it does beg the question because he was pretty adamant in saying he's been petitioning the city to do something about this and nothing's being done. So I would wonder why. Because if it's quite evident that the property needs to be dealt with, whether it be because of rodents or the holes in the backyard or the retaining wall that's fallen in, I believe you mentioned. So I'd like to know why there hasn't been any action taken.
Yeah, and again, on this particular one, I don't have the particulars on it. So again, I invite him to reach out, because I'd love to have that chat and help out where I can. Again, with a lot of these files, it's not the drop of a dime and something gets done, because lots of times there are circumstances that can they can slow things down, whether it's somebody has passed away and then a house is caught up in an estate, or a legal battle, or there's something else going on. These things do happen from time to time, and unfortunately it can slow things down. But this property standards bylaws, they still do apply. It's just that sometimes it might take a little bit longer for staff to be able to effectively deal with the issues, right?
What would constitute these mechanisms kicking in? Because I did mention during that call that some years back there was a friend of mine that was going after the city to get his neighbour to remove this old rust bucket that had been in the driveway for years, and the oil had leaked, and it was you could see it evidently on the driveway. So what constitutes, if my neighbour has a dilapidated, fallen down fence or garbage all over the property, what gets the city involved?
Yeah, so our inspectors have the authority to make determination. It is a bit subjective. Now, I always tell folks when I'm talking to residents on these issues, there is a subjective piece to it, but at the end of the day, you look at a whole fence that's blown down and there's garbage bags everywhere. I think that crosses that objective standard of something needs to be done. I have had calls, of course, where people, it's an eyesore, but at the end of the day, too, people have the right to do things with their property, to have certain things placed on their property. Again, it can be as simple as having some organization to things, because I'm not the type of fella to have a bunch of wooden floorboards and those types of things around my property, but if somebody has them and they're poked underneath their patio, for example, they're neatly stacked, they're covered with a tarp, as much as it might be an eyesore, they still have the right to have those things on their property. So it is a bit subjective. Again, I think there are those standards that will quickly cross the threshold where the property is falling down. Again, if it's a window that's come out, or a rust bucket, as you said, it's one of those tricky ones where people need time to be able to deal with things too, because if they just park that vehicle there, for example, we can't expect them to have it gone within a week and repaired. But if it's been there for a year, I think at that point, then we're looking at an issue.
Fair enough. And then what happens? So say the city sends out an inspector, it's identified whether it be a subjective or what have you. So then what? You send a citation to the property owner, or the city removes the issue, or what happens?
Yeah, so staff are really good with, having that conversation with folks. Hopefully they have that opportunity to speak with them face-to-face or over the phone, and just kind of speak to what the issue is and, what the complaint is kind of brought up. And hopefully that's enough. And oftentimes it is enough to help deal with the problem. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not doable. And again, that could be due to circumstances that somebody's going through, those types of things. But in situations where satisfactory response hasn't been done, staff will then issue a citation, or not a citation, a notice is the correct term, advising that they have to rectify. And from there, if that's not done, then we have the ability ability and the authority, again, that's the inspector's discretion, to go in and clean it up ourselves and bill the property owner. And then that bill attaches to the property. So it's not as though someone would have to pay out of pocket right away, although we would hope, of course, they could. It is something that will fix to the property. So, down the road, if the property is sold, we'll get that back from that fee.
Okay, so that's when the property is sold. But does that also mean in next year's property tax, any arrears or any unpaid fine would be also attached to the property tax as opposed to waiting for sale?
Yeah, so it'll all still be there. I think practically, of course, when we're dealing with someone who's not paying a fine, there's always the chance that they're not also paying their taxes. So interest can accrue, those types of things. We try to be as practical as we can because, again, we're dealing with people who, maybe you just lost your job or you just lost your partner and that was, it was a sole income house, those types of things. Staff do their best to work with people within their circumstances. Again, I know it can be difficult for the neighborhood to have to see these and deal with these situations. I'm very sympathetic to that. And at the same coin too, Patty, I'm here to work for the people that are going through this as well. So if they're dealing with issues, I encourage them to reach out so that we can help you also be able to keep your property up. It's a two-way street, and at the end of the day, I want to represent everybody and do what's best for them, for the neighborhood, for the community at whole.
Fair ball. I appreciate making time, Greg. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. You take care.
You too. Bye-bye. It's Greg Noseworthy, Ward 3 councillor here in the city. And someone just posted on my Twitter feed, you want to see a dilapidated, I should use the actual wording, you want to see a rundown house, drive by one specific address on Monday Pond Road. I know the exact house that they're talking about. And you don't need to be an inspector to identify the fact that that place needs to be torn down. And it hasn't even had electricity apparently hooked up to it for years. So there's lots of examples out there. Some people might even just be, and I don't know if this is true or not, but some people might be just hesitant to get too deeply involved with these types of issues, whether it be, what you think might be a struggle with your municipal government, whatever community you might live in. Maybe it's the not wanting to enter into some sort of spat or war with a neighbor, but there's lots of properties out there that need not only a bit of TLC, but a lot of old grout and stuff that's been collecting over the years, not dealt with, not thrown away. Maybe, just maybe, there's a better way to handle it. All right, let's check one more time in on the Twitter box. And this is from one of our followers and listeners. Nice to hear in this regard to a gentleman who called from Brigus. Nice to hear the caller expressing his appreciation for life. Gives a different perspective. He goes on to say, one thing, I think too many elders become sedentary and reliant on medication. Got to keep moving. There's a lot to that. And if you can't keep moving, it's probably very beneficial all the way down the line through your health and your mental health and everything that you can think of. All right, final break of the morning. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Say good morning to Andrew Safer. He's a mindfulness instructor. Good morning, Andrew. You're on the air.
Hello, Patty. How are you today?
I'm great today. How about you?
Excellent. Thanks for the invite. I wanted to say something about an upcoming workshop series called Suicide Prevention Through Mindfulness Training. So this is really for people who are having suicidal thoughts or have, in the recent past had that and are struggling with that. The mindfulness component, it helps bring us into the present moment. When we're worried about things that are going to happen in the future or regretting things maybe that happened in the past, we can get really carried away in our head. Things can spiral out of control, and we can maybe feel like there's no recourse. But if the more that we can actually live in this world, in this present moment, it makes a huge difference. And the other element is the meditation side of it. Through meditation, we have really a front row seat to our own states of mind. So that's all of them, like not just the good ones. And so we gain an understanding of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, much better understanding. And so that gives us a combination, gives us a great position to be able to deal with difficult thoughts and emotions.
I read a paper some years ago. It was startling just how many people have had suicidal thoughts or urges, behaviors, as opposed to, the completed suicide. But then there's just so many reasons. It could be some sort of diagnosis. It could be as a result of substance abuse and affective disorders or anxiety disorders. There's things called thought disorders, which can lead to that type of suicidal ideation. It could be issues inside the family unit, physical health problems. So there's a wide range of issues that may have people have, even if it's fleeting, to have that urge or that thought. It's something that doesn't necessarily need a clinical intervention. So how does your particular approach work?
Okay, so like I say, there's a basis of meditation practice, and a lot of people haven't done this before, so there's a lot of guidance, and it's a very gradual, evolving thing where people get used to sitting, not entertaining themselves particularly or whatever, and it gives them an opportunity to actually see what's going on in their own mind and also just in the environment. So that is bringing them into the present moment right there. And like I say, it's giving them some insight. So that, for example, we tend to take our own thoughts really seriously, and especially if they're negative. And so this practice shows us that they're really just thoughts. They're not anything that is actually happening in the world. They're just happening in our head. And so the more that we can experience our own thoughts with that kind of perspective and understanding, the less susceptible we're going to be. You mentioned about urges, which is for sure, but we're going to be less susceptible to getting anywhere near carrying them out if we actually realize at the time that they're thoughts. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But it's hard to get out of your own head. It really, truly is. People can use all sorts of techniques, and some might be very beneficial to one individual, maybe not so much to someone else. But just the general concept of getting out of your own way, getting out of your own head, is particularly difficult. I know that I have a hard time with it. I've got a lot going on in my world. I have a lot going on in my head. And most of it, well, a significant portion of it comes from my job. So I have found ways to try to get out of my own way and to get out of my head. It might not work for everyone, but it seems to work for me somewhat anyway.
Yeah, well, even just standing up and going out and going for a short walk, at a certain point in time, it can be a huge boon, compared to sitting there stewing on things, ruminating, making them worse, in your head. So even something that sounds simple, like knowing that it's time to get up and take a break, can be huge.
Yeah. And, it might be quite silly because, of course, this is self-tailored stuff for me. Even just figuring out a way to control my breathing a little bit, which I know is part and parcel with some forms of meditation, but it has helped. Because when I'm at my worst, when my head is really spinning, and I'm not talking about suicidal ideation, I'm just talking about being, muddled in the head or nervous or worried or whatever the case may be, just sometimes getting control of my breathing seems to help me somewhat. And that's not in some sort of big meditation technique that people will be exposed to. But even something as fundamental as that sometimes helps me slow down.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes the simpler things are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference. So, yeah, for sure, with your breath. We don't really talk in our system of meditation, we don't talk about controlling the breath, but it's more like, for example, if I'm lying in bed and it's the middle of the night and I got a lot on my mind, and it might be about this particular program, how things are developing with it. If I bring my attention to my breathing and I stay with it, as best as I can, that can make a huge difference, because it's shifting your attention from your worries to something that's actually happening in the present moment, your breath, right? So, again, like what you're saying, it can make a big difference.
Yeah, and when I say get control of my breathing, I guess that's because I'm thinking about my breathing and consciously breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, like recovering athletes. For sure that's the best way to refill the old lungs. So have you test-driven your approach with any formal organisations like the Canadian Mental Health Association or the like?
Right. Great question. I was partnering with Canadian Mental Health Association, Newfoundland and Labrador. It's almost 4 years ago that we partnered and we developed the program and we piloted it. So actually VOCM Cares was the principal funder back then, by the way. So we were able to do the full 8-week program, and we had a full group of people, and it was fantastic. The one to try to crystallize some of the outcomes, there's one that I mentioned. So there was an evaluation that they fill out in the very first day, and then they fill it out again at the last day, so then you can compare and see what the difference was over the 8 weeks. One question, a clinical psychologist suggested this question. We asked them to rate the intensity of their suicidal thoughts on a scale of 1 to 10. So they did that in the beginning. They did it again at the end. And it was decreased by 41.7% over the 8 weeks. So the intensity went way down. We're not saying they didn't have any more suicidal thoughts, but to me, the intensity means, intensity is where that's something that could really, pull you into taking action, right? But if it's a low intensity, it's something that you can, get through, a lot easier, right?
Yeah, so is there different strategies, different approaches given to the severity or the prolonged nature of any of these ideations? Because they're two different things. You can have a bad day and have a bad moment where you have a fleeting thought of, well, it's just not worth it anymore, versus a day in, day out prolonged exposure to such suicidality.
Yeah, that's another great question, and I'm not an expert on suicidality, but I do know some things about mindfulness training. So I don't think I can answer that. I would have to have more training to be able to differentiate and like how you treat people, on the one hand and on the other hand. But I can say that the group that we had, which was in 2021, there was a woman there who started out rating it as an 8, and in the end it was a 2. So now she had pretty high intensity, and it had a lot to do with her job in that case. But there are different people with very difficult circumstances there, and I think all the ones that stayed engaged over that period of time benefited.
Very quickly before I run out of time, where, when for this lecture?
Right. So the first session is on April 29th. These are on Wednesday nights, and did I say that correctly? No, sorry. It's Tuesday, April 29th, and it's at the Lantern. It's at 7:30 p.m., but we would like people to register. So all they need to do is if they go to my website, it's safermindfulness.com. So that's like the two words, safer and mindfulness. Mindfulness has one L. So safermindfulness.com. They'll see immediately the section, about this, and there's a link to the registration page. So, but it goes for 8 weeks, and starting on April 29th, which is only 6 days from now.
Andrew, I appreciate your time. You've had the last word. Stay in touch and good luck.
Okay. Thanks very much, Patty.
You're welcome.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Here we go. All right, good show today. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.